Discover the amazing secrets of the underworld, an inspirational journey to transform your sleep. Sarah could barely keep her eyes open as she slipped into bed after another grueling shift. A symphony of demands echoed in her mind, patients needing care, her children wide awake, ideas for the next day's schedule racing in the background. As a single mother and devoted nurse, she wore her roles like a badge of honor, yet their weight bent her spirit. Every evening, despite the chaos, she painted on a smile, reminding herself that she was the glue holding everything together. But with each tick of the clock, sleep felt like an unending battle, a privilege snatched away by her own choices and the wild imaginations of her two children, who dreamed big at the expense of her own sleep. When the house finally fell silent, an unexpected find turned her world upside down. Tucked beneath a stack of old family mementos, an ancient book caught her eye, a well-worn treasure that whispered promises of serene sleep. Instinctively, she felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. Could the wisdom of her ancestors hold the answers she desperately sought? Each page turned like a sip of cool water. The techniques, rituals, and practices seemed almost magical, as if they could transport her away from the turbulent sea of exhaustion that drowned her daily. And yet, somewhere deep down, doubt gnawed at her insides. Was she merely grasping at straws, seeking solace in fantasies while the weight of reality bore down on her? As the days stretched on, that very moment became a lifeline. However, just as Sarah began to embrace the knowledge of the underworld of dreams, a tempest swirled unpredictably at her workplace. A negligence lawsuit roiled through the hospital, igniting suspicion amongst the staff. Accusations hung in the air like foreboding clouds, and whispers of blame seeped into every corner of her once secure world. Sarah's mind raced at the implications. Could she risk speaking out about the truth she felt deep within, or should she remain silent, shielding her children's future from the possible ruin of an uncertain career? Conflicted emotions surged through her like wildfire. On one side, her unwavering loyalty to her patients and profession. On the other, the desperate need to protect her family. She felt as if the ground beneath her was shifting. What was her truth worth in the face of collapsing order? Her heart waged war against her mind, each pulse spinning her in a vortex of anguish and anxiety. The weight of community expectations, the perfect employee, the flawless mother, pressed painfully against her chest, a physical ache that refused to dissipate. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Clutching that dusty book, Sarah found herself choked with maximum uncertainty. Could the secrets of her grandmother be the very strength she needed to confront the institution threatening her job? As she hugged her children goodnight, their innocent laughter was her anchor, yet it haunted her. Their future depended on her choices, and each option that danced in her mind felt like walking a tightrope of fear. Determination wrestled with despair as she stepped closer to the edge of making a choice that could redefine her life. Would she assert herself, risking everything she held dear? Or would she slip into silence, the shadows of expectation swallowing her whole? In this moment, as the storm outside raged, she prepared to break free from the confines of her doubt. Could she reclaim her dignity amidst the chaos, or would she fade into the very darkness she sought to escape? The question lingered like smoke on the air, as the dawn of a pivotal chapter loomed on the horizon. The morning light broke through Sarah's curtains like a moment of clarity, cutting through the haze of her fatigue. She found herself sitting at the kitchen table, ancient book open before her, pages filled with potential. The whispers of rituals and practices, cloaked in promise, began to foster a spark of purpose within her. Yet alongside that flicker came the very real friction of fear about what lay ahead, the growing lawsuits, the accusations, and the uncertainty hovering like fog at the edge of her life. As she sipped her coffee, she contemplated her next steps. The chaos at the hospital had thrown her into a complex web of morality. Her instincts screamed for her to protect her patients, to defend herself and her colleagues from potential scapegoating. Could she really put her name on the line in a world that seemed so quick to find someone at fault? Flipping through the pages, she paused at a section detailing methods for grounding oneself in truth, both personally and professionally. Determined, Sarah hated the thought of returning to that work environment, where whispers threatened to unravel her reputation and inadvertently ruin opportunities for her career. Yet the nurses she worked alongside were more than co-workers. They were friends, comrades in the fight for health and wellness. Her heart ached for them, echoing their silent fears and anxieties. But how could she be the one to step forward without jeopardizing everything? She needed to be certain that whatever path she took, it could withstand the scrutiny that was bound to follow. In the solitude of her kitchen, she began to jot down notes, reminders of her skills, moments where she had saved lives, the courage she had exhibited despite trying circumstances. This wasn't merely self-preservation. It was a proclamation of what her work represented. Could this vulnerable act as a guidepost toward reclaiming her confidence? She penned the words down like talismans that would shield her as she stepped into the treacherous waters of confrontational truth. Each tick of the hour crept closer to her fate. That afternoon, the hospital had called an all-staff meeting, a gathering where the fraying threads of their fragile community would be woven together or severed apart. She felt the familiar knot of anxiety settle heavily in her stomach, and yet a surge of determination carved through. Could she face this uphill battle armed only with the truths about her work and the experiences of those around her? As nurses filed into the conference room, Sarah searched the faces around her, finding unity despite their divided fears. Voices murmured in anxiety, and individuals shifted uncomfortably. There was a collective heaviness that seemed to weigh on her shoulders, yet somehow lightened by the solidarity of their shared fight. In that moment, she glimpsed not only her path, but also a chance to rally the collective resolve of her peers. As the meeting commenced and the report was read, each word felt like an anchor in a tumultuous sea, pulling her deeper into her introspection. Voices began to echo in her mind. Her children's laughter, her patients' gratitude, her own battles with sleepless nights. With every page she had turned in the book, she felt closer to understanding the brutal essence of her destiny, the need to speak truth, even at the risk of uncertain consequences. Then it hit her. Somewhere in the depths of her heart, beneath her self-doubt and protective instincts, lay a reservoir of courage waiting to burst forth. The fire within her began to stoke, and as she watched the meeting unfold, she made a choice. The time to confront both her fears and her colleagues' suspicions was upon her. Steeling herself for what lay ahead, she stood up, the murmur of strangers falling silent as she found her voice. Would this be the moment that ultimately defined her? In that instant, the horizon loomed close, ready to present her with the ultimate test. Would she endure the reckoning, or would fear send her spiraling into darkness once more? With resolve, she prepared to reshape her narrative, knowing that this pivotal choice might lead her toward the first step in reclaiming sleep and her life. With her heart racing and the eyes of her colleagues locked on hers, Sarah sensed the gravity of the moment. The conference room felt suffocating. The air was heavy with unspoken worries and shared anxiety. She took a deep breath, feeling the warm rush of adrenaline pulse through her veins. This was her moment, to shatter the weight of doubt, to let the convictions she had quietly nurtured rise to the surface. Can we talk about what's really happening here? The words came out sharper than she intended, but they sliced through the tension like a knife. The collective gaze shifted, revealing a mixture of shock and eagerness. Could they sense her determination, her desperation? With each passing second, fragments of anger, fear, and hope intertwined within, urging her to lead. "We are all feeling the pressure, the fear," she continued, noting the slight nods scattered among her peers. "But we owe it to ourselves and to our patients to confront these challenges directly. Accusations are swirling, but if we stay silent, we play into a narrative that diminishes our work and integrity. We can't let that happen." Shifting in her seat, she noted the subtle changes around the room. Whispers had started, a rustle of encouragement that swept through her colleagues. Each pair of eyes now reflected her resolve, sparking a flicker of hope. "Each of us has faced difficult situations, had our own challenges. I remember nights spent worrying over our patients, feeling responsible even when situations spiraled out of control." The emotion was raw, the truth spilling from her as she unpacked her experiences. We need to acknowledge these moments, not as failures, but as examples of our commitment. We must protect our strength and our community. As Sarah spoke, she felt her internal compass recalibrating. Each phrase she uttered tethered her back to her purpose, the foundations of her career built on empowerment rather than fear. The murmurs grew louder, the spirit of solidarity thickening in the air. Their hearts aligned, shared thoughts echoing within her mind, a collective understanding blooming from the fears that had tethered them all. Then came the revelation, a surge of clarity amidst the swirling chaos. Sarah wasn't standing alone. Within the depths of her uncertainty lay a network of resilient souls. Inspiration propelled her words. She wasn't merely fighting for herself. She was fighting for a reinstatement of truth within a system that had let them all down. "Someone must advocate for our patients and for us," she declared, more forcefully now. Her passion ignited renewed energy around the table. "We need to be transparent. Let's present our side of the story, back it with our experiences, and preserve our names and our practices." A few murmurs turned into tentative nods, and she saw faces stiffen as her words took hold. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was becoming a collective call to action. She had expected fear to reign, but here she was, catalyzing courage instead. Yet amidst the exhilaration, a flicker of doubt washed over her. What if they faced repercussions for standing together? Would the administration punish this newfound defiance, unleashing concerns they had all quietly harbored? There it was, a delicate balance between hope and trepidation. Displaying that vulnerability, she spoke again. "I understand that taking this stand may expose us to risks. But staying silent is a far greater threat than anything that can come from walking together toward the truth. Are we willing to fight for every patient we serve, for the integrity of our practice?" An electrifying silence enveloped the room, the palpable tension transforming into a shared resolve. Just as she had hoped, a few had begun to stand, placing their hands on the table, signaling solidarity. As the meeting came to a close, something shifted within Sarah. She couldn't control the future, but she felt a rush of empowerment, the type that could ripple through the fabric of their professional community. This felt like the beginning of a fight that was not only hers, but theirs as well. But as she stepped away from the meeting, the looming questions circled back to her. Would this courageous moment bring unity or expose fractures she hadn't anticipated? Determined to leap into the unpredictable, she glanced back at her colleagues, now engaged in whispered discussions, feeling a flutter of anticipation. This was just the start. The next phase demanded every ounce of her resilience. She knew they were about to face the real test of their commitment to each other and their profession. And beneath that simmering excitement lingered a challenge. What would happen when the known adversaries started to make their moves? How far would she be willing to go to protect her newfound resolve? As Sarah strode through the corridor, her heartbeat echoed in her ears, a constant reminder of the high stakes she had just committed to. The walls of the hospital felt both familiar and foreign, comforting yet charged with a nervous energy she had never experienced before. Confidence bubbled within her, but so did the unmistakable taste of fear. She closed her eyes and drew in a deep breath, willing her thoughts to align. The meeting had ignited a flicker of courage, but could that spark sustain a flame against the looming threats? The administration, she knew, wouldn't take kindly to dissent. The weight of responsibility now rested not just on her shoulders, but upon all those who dared to stand beside her. Clarity washed over her. She needed to prepare. The first step was to gather the spirits of her colleagues. She began crafting a plan, careful to tread the line between urgency and caution. It would be naive to plunge headfirst into confrontation without a strategy. A new resolve coursed through her. The change she sought would require an organized approach, collating their experiences, laying out evidence, and bolstering their arguments. They would no longer be passive victims to a narrative penned by faceless administration. Over the next few days, Sarah transformed her office into a war room. Folders brimmed with documented incidents, personal testimonies, and collective experiences. With each eligible voice she contacted, she felt her confidence swell. This was more than a fight for herself. It was a crusade in the name of their patients and their profession. The act of gathering stories rejuvenated her purpose. Each one spoke volumes of the commitment embedded in their craft. She guided her colleagues through discussions, fostering an atmosphere where untruths could be challenged and creativity encouraged. Yet, as the days turned to nights, doubt would creep in, often unannounced. Despite having cultivated a spirit of unity, she feared the cracks that could emerge under pressure. Would they falter? Would she? Every time a colleague hesitated to speak up or uncertainly deflected her proposals, Sarah felt the combined weight of responsibility press down even harder. During one late-night session, the room dimly lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb, Sarah reflected on her growing unease. An eerie thought gnawed at her. Was she only feeding their fears with her ambition, or was she catalyzing a movement towards undeniable change? The walls of her office, lined with words that once inspired her, now seemed to close in. Breathing deeply took on a frantic rhythm as her thoughts spiraled, recalling the content and tone of communications from their administration, riddled with veiled threats. Resting her head on the desk, she closed her eyes momentarily. When she opened them, a realization struck her. She could not afford to impose her timeline or expectations upon others. This was not merely her battle. Real change required patience and support. Her role had shifted from a solo crusader to a nurturer of resilience within her team. With deliberate intention, she resolved to approach the challenges ahead differently. They would navigate this together, each step a collective one. The next morning, an unexpected email from the administration appeared in her inbox. The subject was stark: discussion on recent concerns. She felt the familiar knot tighten in her stomach as she read the details. The proposed meeting stood as a potential turning point. The tension between vulnerability and strength was parading before her eyes. Sarah gathered her thoughts, weighing her options. This could either mark the beginning of their downfall or ignite a necessary confrontation. Would their voices be heard, or would they simply echo into the abyss of institutional indifference? That question hung in the air with the same intensity that propelled her to action. She felt the heat of uncertainty radiate through her. Would she have the audacity to illuminate the truth in front of transparency's gatekeepers? As she readied herself to respond, determination coiled tightly within. It was not just about her convictions anymore. It was about confronting the looming shadows of the unknown, and this time she wouldn't face them alone. But just how would she harness that courage when the time came to stand against them? The moment was nearing. A revelation awaited to unfold. The day of the meeting arrived, dense with expectation. As Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her reflection seemed to suggest two paths diverging beneath the surface. One was filled with the potential of change, while the other threatened to engulf her in fear's suffocating embrace. She steadied her breath and tied her hair back, grounding herself in her purpose. This wasn't simply about her. This was for every voice that had gone unheard within the sterile walls of the hospital. Walking through the hospital's corridors, she heard the familiar sounds of beeping machines and soft conversations, but today they felt different, almost electric with anticipation. Each footfall echoed her resolve, reminding her of the collective strength she had worked so hard to galvanize. She reached the conference room, a sterile space that loomed with authority. She was acutely aware of how the environment around her mirrored her internal landscape, both brimming with untapped potential and fraught with tension. As colleagues gathered, she looked into their faces, absorbing their anxiety and determination. Sarah assigned herself the role of the anchor, steadying their nerves with a whispered reassurance. Every individual in that room had endured their own struggles. They carried burdens that were often invisible. But today, their burdens would shift from personal to shared, creating a tapestry of courage woven from their narratives. The meeting began, and an air of unease hung over the room, punctuated by nervous glances and suppressed sighs. When the administration representatives entered, a palpable shift occurred, akin to the quiet before a storm. Sarah felt her heart race, but steadied it with a mental reminder: this was their moment. As the presentations began, she listened intently, absorbing the strategies and policies laid out in front of them. Words spun a fabric of indifference, and Sarah felt her blood boil. There was an undercurrent of dismissal woven into the administration's language. As the floor was opened for questions, her teammates shuffled uncomfortably. Sarah could sense their fear. What if their voices cracked under pressure? A pulse of frustration gripped her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her purpose settle firmly on her shoulders. "I have questions," she declared, her voice unwavering enough to turn heads. She posed her first inquiry, taking care to articulate the deep-seated concerns her colleagues had brought forth, bringing personal stories into the sterile atmosphere. For a moment, silence rippled through the room. She felt as if time had paused, and all eyes were on her. She could almost hear their unspoken thoughts of fear and admiration. How could she embody their wishes, their hopes, while confronting the authority looming over them? With each question she raised, tremors of realization crept through the administration. Their dismissals began to stutter, opening cracks in their polished statements. Witnessing this shift, Sarah tasted the early signs of victory, but also the heavy burden of responsibility amplifying within her. She wasn't just representing her fears. She had become the embodiment of her colleagues' frustrations. Just as the administration appeared ready to concede on a few points, a seasoned executive's sneer sliced through the air. "Perhaps it's naive to assume we hold sway over the decisions made here. Your opinions have merit, but they come with risks." The implication was clear. Dissent could lead to dire consequences. Her heart raced, but Sarah refused to fold. She recalled the stories of her colleagues, the uproar of the murmurs in the corridors. Standing there, she realized that the risks outlined were trivial when compared to the truth they held. This meeting was no longer just about a rebuttal. It had morphed into a stand for integrity and authenticity within their profession. With resolve swelling inside her, she answered the executive, determination glimmering in her voice. "We are not risking anything. It's our duty to advocate for our patients and ourselves. Change doesn't come without challenge." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. Had she crossed a line? Would they face consequences she hadn't foreseen? The intricate web of office politics spun ominously in her mind, and her resolve faltered. The echoes of her declaration hung in the air, a challenge set against a backdrop of trepidation. What would the repercussions be for her and her colleagues, awakened from complacency? The moment stood suspended, pregnant with possibility, but teetering on the edge of reluctance. With uncertainty looming, Sarah braced for the reply that could either solidify their newfound courage or signal a retreat into silence. The battle for their voices had only just begun. Sarah felt the weight of every gaze in the room as the executive's dismissal loomed ominously. Hesitation washed over her, battling with the tingling current of collective resolve electrifying the atmosphere. As the senior administrator regarded her with narrowed eyes, she could sense the tension thickening. A silence settled, heavy and suffocating, as the reality of her challenge began to sink in. Dissent comes with risks? Her voice, laced with defiance, echoed in her mind. Did she truly believe those words, or were they merely a shield against her faltering confidence? The moment crystallized every doubt she had wrestled with since stepping into the conference room. Yet amidst that, a deep conviction began to emerge. Could be echoes of their concerns, the unsung stories of frustration and pain, become a litany strong enough to pierce this corporate facade? The executive's smile twisted, half amusement, half condescension. Your passion is commendable, but we can't entertain emotions. We must adhere to protocols. The quip struck like a spark, igniting residual dissent among her colleagues. Their eyes flickered with renewed strength, yet anxiety still glimmered beneath the surface. Would she be the catalyst for change, or merely a cautionary tale? Feeling her pulse quicken, Sarah considered the implications of her boldness. The administration had weaponized logic, wielding it with an authority that seemed impenetrable. Yet this authority was predicated on silence, on the supposed unassailability of established norms. She couldn't let their veiled threats deter her. It was both an obstacle and a challenge she needed to confront, not just for herself, but for what lay beneath the surface. Protocols can breed stagnation, Sarah rebutted, her voice steadier than she felt. We owe it to ourselves and our patients to challenge them, to demand accountability. If we don't speak up, who will? Her heart pounded fiercely, buoyed by an unexpected echo of support from the room. A few colleagues nodded slightly, as if stirred from a slumber. Continued improvements in patient care rely on adaptability and the willingness to act on feedback. Isn't that what we are here to cultivate? She could feel the tides shift ever so slightly. Each word she spoke seemed to build a dam against the encroaching waves of doubt. A different administrator, younger and seemingly less hardened, furrowed his brow. Is that what you really believe, or is it just a narrative you want to push? His challenge crackled through the air, igniting a complex dance of emotions, fear, anger, and fierce determination. Before she could respond, Sarah's mind flashed to specific moments she had witnessed, disturbing cases where bureaucratic indifference had led to loss, where passion was suffocated by protocol. This was her moment to weave those narratives into something invigorating, compelling their collective spirit. I believe it's a responsibility we must embrace, she replied, infusing her urgency into each syllable. The executive's gaze hardened as he attempted to regain control. Careful, Sarah. Thinking outside the box can have consequences. We can't disrupt operations over subjective experiences. Yet Sarah had come too far to back down. Then let me educate you on the costs of compliance over compassion, she countered, power wrapping around her like an indomitable cloak. Colleagues began to murmur in agreement, a palpable shift in energy blossoming behind her. Each moment that passed felt like a delicate balance hanging in the air, a breath held between fear and awakening. Determination surged within her, but so did the pulse of uncertainty. Could she truly harness this growing energy into substantive change, or was she propelling her colleagues toward an invisible cliff? Each answer invited more questions, each affirmation more vulnerabilities. As the meeting drew toward its climax, Sarah faced the cacophony of her thoughts and the anticipation of her colleagues. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was their need for truth. Now was not the time for retreat. The need for change bore a louder echo in her mind than any fear. How far would they slide back into silence if she faltered? As the executive opened his mouth to respond, anticipation thundered in Sarah's ears. The moment of truth approached, and the next words would etch a path forward or seal their fates into precarious firmament. "Let's hear what you truly believe," she urged, a challenge hanging in the air, inviting confrontation. The sting of uncertainty pulsed, yet she stood firm, ready to meet whatever came next. What awaited her in the aftermath of this confrontation as they turned the tide from silence into action? The executive's voice sliced through the tense air as he finally responded, forcing Sarah to brace herself against the inevitable backlash. "We strive for efficiency, Sarah. Your drive for an emotional approach will only complicate matters." His words dripped with authority, each syllable a reminder of the power he held. But rather than quailing, a fire ignited within her. "I'm not advocating for chaos. I'm proposing a recalibration of our priorities," she argued, her voice unwavering. "Compassion doesn't negate efficiency, it enhances it. Every day, we interact with individuals whose lives are at stake. Isn't it our duty to ensure their care is as humane as it is clinical?" A murmur of agreement rippled through her colleagues, stirring something deeper inside Sarah. This was not merely a fight for her voice, it was a call to arms for the collective frustration that had long been muted by policy. As the executive fumed, she caught glimpses of pleading expressions from her coworkers, their silent wishes for transformation bubbling just beneath the surface. In that charged moment, Sarah felt an unexpected sense of clarity wash over her. Every doubt she had battled transformed into something tangible: resolve, purpose. This was a journey not just for her, but for them all. She was awakening confidence that lay dormant, the latent capability to challenge the norm and recalibrate expectations within their work environment. The executive's rebuttal loomed like a dark cloud overhead, but Sarah processed the urgency of her position. She needed to strategize, consider her words carefully, but with each passing second, her heartbeat quickened. A decision lay ahead. Would she rise to the occasion and take on this role, or retreat into what had been comfortable? "Think of the changes we could implement," she pressed on, breaking through her own uncertainty. "Imagine a workplace where voices don't just echo in silence, but are heralded in decisions that save lives. Isn't that the essence of our mission?" Skepticism met with a wave of daring. A chorus of yeses began echoing softly around the room. She could feel the energy swell as she spoke, fueling her momentum like wind beneath wings. Every participant shared a flicker of awakening, and here was her realization. Sustaining this energy was both a challenge and an opportunity to grow, not just within the meeting, but within herself. A voice broke through again, this time from a weary supervisor. "We've tried to push through these ideas before, Sarah. The risk is too great. Are you willing to face that risk? What happens if you fail?" Her pulse spiked. Failure was a familiar, haunting specter, yet so was mediocrity. "Failure is inevitable if we don't at least try," she responded, aware of her own vulnerability, but unwilling to back down. "What is worse than failing? It's standing still while the world around us changes." As she continued, Sarah recognized a shift, a cracking of the corporate glass that had imprisoned their voices for too long. Hope transformed into action. Colleagues began to speak up, sharing their grievances and desires, each narrative threading together a strong tapestry of resilience. The more they spoke, the more Sarah felt buoyed by their collective willingness to venture into the unknown. Yet with each affirmation, a new anxiety tugged at her core. How far could they push this? Would that fragile alliance hold when confronted with harsh realities? With every voice that joined hers, she was drawing near to a precipice. The time for action was close, but the outcome remained uncertain. What would the fallout be when they finally worked together to dismantle the structures that had kept them in check? As applause began to resonate in the room, an electronifying realization ignited within Sarah's chest, a dawning comprehension of her own strength. The foundation of change was manifesting before her in real time. But shadows of dissent still lingered. Compelling questions remained unasked. Was this newfound camaraderie merely a fragile mirage or a robust bridge to a brighter future? And as her colleagues surged with newfound hope, what would the executive unleash upon them for their disobedience? With every intention pressed forward, Sarah braced herself for the impending storm, aware that every resolution made was just the beginning of a much larger struggle. How they would navigate that struggle and the sacrifices it might demand was yet to unfold. The boardroom buzzed with newly kindled energy, a palpable shift that left Sarah both exhilarated and terrified. With applause fading into silence, she could feel the weight of expectations settle onto her shoulders, a burden wrapped in a thin veil of hope and trepidation. How would she lead this newfound momentum? In the days that followed, Sarah immersed herself in planning the path forward. Her desk, once a sterile space overflowing with neatly organized files, morphed into a chaotic battlefield of sticky notes and half-empty coffee cups, a testament to her relentless pursuit of a vision, a workplace where empathy was woven into the fabric of productivity. She studied case studies of other organizations that had successfully fostered a compassionate approach and refined her strategy. Yet, with every success story she absorbed, the haunting specter of potential failure loomed. Was she truly equipped to challenge the systemic rigidity that had entrenched itself within their culture? Questions spiraled in her mind, negotiating between excitement and self-doubt. Each time she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass, she didn't see the confident leader she aspired to be. She saw a woman standing at the edge of a precipice. Determined to quash the noise of her insecurities, Sarah sought out opportunities to engage her colleagues further. She initiated informal meetings, creating safe spaces for collective brainstorming. She encouraged everyone to voice their concerns and ideas, beautifully echoing her proclamation from the previous meeting. Initially, responses varied from curt nods to ambivalent shrugs, but slowly, walls began to crumble. She watched as individuals who had long suppressed their opinions came alive, their previously muted voices gaining strength and vibrance. But for every wave of enthusiasm, a current of resistance flowed beneath. The executive had not yet intervened, but the tension was thick, ever present, even when unspoken. One afternoon, an unexpected visit from the executive shattered her momentum. His eyes, like sharp blades, surveyed the room filled with animated discussions. "What is this?" he barked, the confidence of a commanding presence reasserting dominance. Sarah's heart raced as she steeled herself, wrestling the urge to shrink. "We're discussing how to foster a more compassionate workplace, sir," she managed, her voice steady. "A compassionate workplace?" His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Are we here to hold hands and sing songs? Efficiency, Sarah. Always efficiency. If we lose sight of that, we lose everything." In that moment, the fragile threads of her initiative felt vulnerable to the weight of his authority. How could she fight the looming fear that gripped her mind? Every instinct urged her to retreat, but Sarah's resolve ignited. She took a breath, feeling the warmth of her colleagues rallying behind her as she said, "Compassion is not a hindrance, it can drive efficiency. We can care deeply and still achieve our goals. As we nurture our team, we improve our service. It's not an either-or situation." Silence enveloped the group as the air thickened with anticipation. Would the executive reprimand her audacity, or could this fork in the road lead somewhere transformative? Gripping the edge of her desk, Sarah prepared for whatever was to come. She'd crossed over an invisible line. Pushing forward now was the only option. The stakes were higher than ever, and the once soft glow of hope threatened to extinguish beneath the looming shadow of authority. Reflecting on her potential for leadership, she started to question the foundations of her own beliefs. Could she truly stand firm against the tides of opposition? As the executive's gaze flickered dispassionately across her colleagues, Sarah couldn't ignore the weight of the moment pressing upon her. As the silence persisted, her internal compass urged her to reaffirm her commitment, to stand tall amid the looming storm. The fate of their fragile alliance rested not only on her shoulders, but on her ability to navigate through the turbulence. What would she sacrifice if it came down to it? As resolution simmered in the air, Sarah felt clarity surge. The true battle was just beginning. How would she wield empathy as her greatest weapon, and against whom would she wield it? The moment of truth was near. Though the silence clung to the air, Sarah's mind raced faster than her heartbeat. She could feel the warmth of her colleagues' backing, yet the distance between their collective idealism and the executive's stark pragmatism gaped like a chasm. She understood then that the battle wouldn't merely be about convincing the executive. It was about sustaining the spark ignited in the room and turning it into a movement that could withstand scrutiny. Determined not to falter, she spoke again, her voice stronger this time. Let's define efficiency in broader terms. A compassionate workplace can lead to more innovative solutions and enhanced teamwork. Isn't that our end goal? Her heart stole glances at the faces around her, each one reflecting a flicker of hope mingled with doubt. Would her words resonate or fall on deaf ears? The executive glanced around the room skeptically, but she could sense a shift, an incremental cracking of the ice beneath their feet. With a heavy sigh, he replied, "You're asking for my support without demonstrating results. Show me that your brand of compassion can yield tangible outcomes." His words sliced through her, but they also ignited new possibilities within her, a challenge for her to embrace rather than retreat from. "Then I will," she asserted, feeling her trajectory recalibrating. "I'll gather metrics and feedback from our teams and draft a proposal showcasing how compassion correlates with productivity." With his disdainful nod, he turned, heading for the door, leaving a whirlwind of thoughts swirling behind him. The gravity of her resolve had upended not only the executive's presence, but her own outlook too. She would transform empathy into measurable success. Over the next few days, Sarah transformed her vision into a strategic blueprint. She became a relentless investigator, diving into data analytics with a fervor that had her previously buried in feelings of uncertainty. With a dissonant nod, he turned, heading for the door, leaving a whirlwind of thoughts swirling behind him. The gravity of her resolve had upended not only the executive's presence, but her own outlook too. She would transform empathy into measurable success. Over the next few days, Sarah transformed her vision into a strategic blueprint. She became a relentless investigator, diving into data analytics with a fervor that had her previously buried in feelings of uncertainty. She meticulously mapped out how compassion could translate into metrics: reduced turnover, increased job satisfaction, improved collaboration, and ultimately higher productivity. Each statistic served as a digital brick laid in her foundation of change. Yet every late-night drafting and graphing session confronted her with a small voice creeping into her consciousness: doubt. Who was she to challenge the status quo? The fear of gathering her data only for it to crumble under scrutiny kept her awake, gnawing at her confidence. Her mind fluctuated between elation at progress and relentless terror of failure. Despite the storm, she undertook a pivotal discovery. During one late-night session, as shadows crept across her desk, her eyes landed on a feedback form from a colleague, an individual deeply skeptical of her methodologies. She had shared a simple comment about how small acts of appreciation made a difference in their productivity. The comment lodged itself in her mind, and infinitely her analytics began to seem fertile ground for growth. What if each statistic was not only a number, but included personal stories? In her 4th week since the boardroom confrontation, she decided to weave storytelling into her proposal. Empirical data would meet qualitative experiences, a harmonious balance of numbers and narratives. She began drafting testimonies from her colleagues, detailing how compassionate engagement had sparked their ideas and revitalized their spirits. And so, the atmosphere in the office began to change once again. The more she shared her approach, the more others recognized resonant experiences in themselves. The days turned into weeks as she devoted herself to this integration of compassion and efficiency, the proposal shaping into something personal and profound. Yet, as she approached the deadline for her presentation, another worry reared its head. How would the executive's entrenched views respond to her innovation? With a firm resolution, Sarah decided to invite him into the dialogue. Her request for a meeting felt like timing a delicate dance on a tightrope, but it was essential. She felt the need for his critical insights to challenge her assumptions within her comprehensive proposal. The day of the meeting arrived, and the air hummed with anticipation. Sarah stood, her heart drumming in her ears as she prepared to expose her blend of passion and rationale to the executive. Was this the moment she had been building toward, or would it escalate into another confrontation? As she stepped into the conference room, determination filled every fiber of her being. The stakes had never been higher. Would the melding of her vision withstand the scrutiny of power? She took a deep breath, ready to present not just numbers, but the essence of the vision she truly believed in. The moment of connection had begun. Would her melding of compassion and results narrate a new story, or would she encounter yet another storm? Sarah stood at the front of the conference room, her heart racing as she looked across the table at the executive's skeptical gaze. This was her moment to synthesize the data and emotions she had unearthed over the past weeks. She had transformed herself from merely a participant in the healthcare system to a formidable advocate for change, and today she would present a case that combined empirical results with the humanity that drove them. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, voice clear and strong. She clicked the remote to display her first slide, a graph illustrating the correlation between employee satisfaction and patient care outcomes. What you see here is direct evidence that compassionate work environments lead to better patient results. A recent study confirmed that when employees feel valued, the care they provide is more attentive and effective. The executive furrowed his brow, clearly skeptical. But Sarah pressed forward, emboldened by the rhythm of her own argument. "I've gathered testimonials from our own staff, showing how small acknowledgments have improved morale and led to innovative patient care solutions. Here's one story," she paused, projecting a heartfelt account from a colleague who had witnessed a drastic improvement in team collaboration following a focused effort to foster appreciation within the department. As she shared each compelling story, she watched the executive's expression shift, slowly morphing from indifference to curiosity. The tension in her shoulders began to release. She was beginning to establish resonance. Her vision was coalescing around them, much like a warm gathering, challenging the cold, hard facts with undeniable emotion, a fusion that typically melted executives like ice under the sun. "So, here's the innovative proposal I envision," she continued, her confidence surging as she laid out her actionable plan. "If we implement regular appreciation workshops and integrate these compassionate practices into performance metrics, we're not just reshaping workplace culture, but also enhancing our efficiency as a healthcare provider. Kindness and results don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can coexist and thrive." With each word, Sarah could feel validation wrapping around her, reinforcing her growth, not only as a nurse, but as a leader. She had stepped past the abyss of doubt and landed firmly in the terrain of conviction. The executive leaned forward slightly, a flicker of consideration crossing his features. "You believe these workshops can yield measurable outcomes?" "I do," Sarah affirmed, conviction lacing her response. "They can create a contagious environment of care that reverberates across all levels of the organization, leading to higher retention rates and improved patient satisfaction scores. I will tie these outcomes into quarterly assessments to ensure accountability." The room was enveloped in charged silence, her words echoing like rhythmic pulses. As the presentation progressed, each slide she turned revealed insights and clarifications that pushed aside the apprehension she previously felt. They weren't just numbers and testimonials anymore. They reflected shared experiences that had the potential to be life-changing, both for the employees and the patients they served. By the time Sarah reached the concluding statements of her presentation, she felt as if she had conquered not only the obstacles in her workplace, but also the haunting doubts within herself. "Imagine a workplace where we can openly discuss our struggles, share insights, and celebrate our successes," she exclaimed, her voice full of hope. "By fostering compassion as a core value, we'll redefine what it means to care, not just for patients, but for one another, substantially improving our entirety as a healthcare system." For a moment, the executive's stern demeanor softened, his gaze lingering on Sarah with an intensity that signified a breakthrough. The atmosphere in the room shifted, as if they all took a collective breath, recognizing the monumental shift in narrative she had conjured from sheer perseverance and courage. "Your research is compelling, Sarah," he finally said, nodding thoughtfully. "And perhaps those outcomes are what this hospital needs. I'll bring this to the board for consideration." Her heart soared. The validation felt like the warm embrace of success, an affirmation of the months of struggle she had endured. In that pivotal moment, Sarah realized she had transformed fundamentally. She emerged as a recognized voice not only for herself, but for her colleagues who had stood silently for too long. The weight of expectation she once bore had lifted, replaced by the burgeoning sense of confidence and competence that came from speaking her truth. As she stepped out of the conference room, the sun filtering through the corridor brightened the path ahead. With her pulse steady and a smile breaking across her face, she couldn't help but think of the journey that lay behind her. She had faced her fears and triumphed against the very doubts that threatened her career and sense of self-worth. Her children, who had become her anchor, could now look to her as a role model, embodying unwavering resolve. This wasn't just about sleep. It was about the power of one voice intertwining with collective strength to achieve meaningful change. She had conquered her uncertainties, built a bridge between compassion and efficiency, and rewritten her narrative within the healthcare landscape. Walking confidently through the halls of her workplace, she recognized her accomplishments deeply. Sarah had not only transformed herself, she had laid the foundation for a future redefined by integrity, support, and shared humanity. Now she needed to harness this power and spread it beyond herself. The world outside was waiting, and with unwavering determination, she knew the journey of transformation was just beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.